So you dipped your feet into looking for a new airplane, and now you're ready to start doing some serious research. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the steps I used to get my first airplane. Hi guys, and welcome to my channel where we talk about all things aviation. If you don't know me, my name's Dave and I've been a pilot for nearly 30 years. I was a former naval aviator for 20 years and now I fly a big, heavy, multi-engine airplane all over the world. Welcome back, YouTube. This is part 2 of buying an airplane. If you haven't caught the first episode yet, be sure to go back and check it out. I'll post a link in the description down below as well. Today, we're going to continue on with the research phase, which will also morph into some of the trade-offs that I've alluded to in my previous video. So let's get right into it. First thing I want to talk about is some of the resources that I kind of hinted at in the last video. First of all, AOPA is a great resource. If you haven't considered joining, I highly recommend it. I'm not getting any reimbursement from AOPA, as I mentioned, but they have a great laundry list of things to consider when buying an airplane. First and foremost, it walks you through what you should consider and what you should possibly be looking at. It also talks about the use of an aircraft broker. Brokers are out there and their job is to kind of take what you want in an airplane and start looking and making suggestions. And then finally, when you've settled on one, they will broker the deal for you for a nominal fee. They do a lot of hard work. I've talked to a couple of them via email and on the phone, and they seem like great people. Also on the AOPA website, there's a service called VREF, and I'm going to allude to it back and forth throughout this video, just to kind of show you what you should be looking for, or at least a baseline of what the pricing is. But there's also a lot of great information in there about the cost of an engine overhaul, or what is the average operating cost, how the prices have gone up in the last 2 years since the start of the pandemic, etc. So using controller as an example, here we have two 1981 Cessna 172RG Cutlass. Both airplanes are significantly different in price. The top one, listed at $170,000, has 8,104 hours on it. If you look at the bottom one, it's listed at $87,500 and it has comparable number of hours at 8,274. So we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper to find out the differences between these two. If we go to VREF on AOPA's website, you can see at the very top for a 1981 172RG, the price range should be pretty close to about $87,200, depending on what the airplane has going on for it. If we look down at the bottom at the engine, it says it's a 2,000-hour engine or a 12-year engine, and the average overhaul cost is $23,000. So let's figure out why there's such a big price difference between these two planes that seemingly are pretty much the same. Going back and clicking on the first plane and then scrolling down, we can see that the engine has 0 hours on it since it was overhauled, which means effectively you have a brand new engine in that airplane. We already saw in VREF that the overhaul cost averages about $23,000, so that'll add a good deal of price to that airplane. Also down here in avionics, it's got a brand new Garmin GTN 650 installed. If we look at the cost of a 650 on Garmin's website, we can see that it's roughly $12,000 plus the cost of an avionics technician to install it into your airplane. So that adds quite a bit of value to it as well. Looking at the second plane on controller.com, the one that was priced closer to what VREF recommended, we see it has about 1,300 hours since the last time the engine was overhauled, which leaves about 700 hours available. And if you're flying between 50 and 100 hours per year, that's plenty of engine life left to fly this airplane. Scrolling down at the avionics, we don't see any real upgrades like the previous airplane has. In fact, this one doesn't even have an autopilot, which kind of keeps it at its bare bones base price as recommended on VREF. So you can see the price difference on these airplanes can vary widely depending on how much engine life is left, what avionics have been upgraded, and various other things that we'll get into here in a bit. But I also want to give a plug to checking out the different forums out there, or the websites like the Cessna forums that are out there. Or besides Cessna forums, there are Beechcraft, Mooney. Cirrus has a very active forum. It doesn't take much to join, although I think some of these charge a nominal yearly fee, some don't. And you can get a lot of information from those websites. Also, some of the resellers out there, you'll see big names, especially as you start researching certain types of airplanes. I'll use Cirrus as an example because that's the next airplane I'm going to talk about. There are a number of resellers out there who produce or who will answer questions that you have about different airplanes that they're selling, and you will be able to glean information about the overall different types like the G2, the G3, the G5 that Cirrus makes. When you first try and tackle this, it becomes massively confusing, the differences of, say, which ones have the turbochargers, which ones have the 3,600 pound gross weight as opposed to 3,400 pounds. And what are the trade-offs, which is kind of what I'm walking into. You just saw it on the previous airplane, but going forward, as we talk about a Cirrus airplane, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to have, say, comfort or range or speed, etc.? And we'll take a look at that here in the next example. So looking at another search on controller.com, here we see two 2009 Cirrus G3s. These are the SR22 models. They both turbocharged. That was standard for that year. They both have the Garmin Perspective, which is basically the G1000 system. It's a great avionics suite. And the top one is listed at $600,000. The bottom one is just shy of $500,000. So a big difference between the same model year of these airplanes. The one on the top has 800 hours on the airframe. The one on the bottom has about 2,300. So let's kind of delve in and figure out what the differences are between these two. So looking at the first one, we see that it is just like they listed, 800 hours since new. It has air conditioning, and its basic empty weight is 2,438. So 2,438 pounds, which for this model year, the max gross weight was 3,400 pounds. So this gives you roughly a 960 pound useful load. Now, those of you who aren't familiar with general aviation, like I wasn't, I was all military and big, large, heavy commercial aircraft. Useful load includes passengers, baggage, and fuel. You got to add all three of those up, and you can start running out of passenger room very quickly if you load the wings completely full of gas. Scrolling down a little bit further, we notice most of the avionics are pretty standard for the Cirrus at this time. Looks like they've got Avidyne active traffic system added in, some enhanced ground proximity warning. Down here under additional equipment, it has a factory installed air conditioning system, which is a good thing. Right above that, we see that the parachute repack, the cap system, is due in 2028. And that's a pretty costly repack that needs to be done every 10 years. Jumping over to VREF on AOPA's site, we see that the parachute repack costs are about $15,000 to $18,000, and it needs to be done every 10 years. The average engine overhaul cost is $41,000. Up at the very top, it lists the average sale price at about $506,000. So this one looks like it's priced on the very higher end of what's being asked for the G3 2009 model. Clicking on the second airplane listed for $493,500, we can see it has the Garmin Perspective system. If we scroll down and look in the description, we see that the airplane the engine was overhauled 658 hours ago. It has the Garmin Perspective. It also has the EFIS camera, the EVS, which is a forward-looking infrared camera. I'm not sure exactly how this works, but I have one in the very large airplane that I fly, and it really, depending on what infrared range it looks at, it can really help with runway acquisition and also dodging clouds and thunderstorms at night where the naked eye can't see them. The note right below that, it says it does not have air conditioning. They search for an aircraft without air conditioning because it gives them the option of carrying more passengers or weight. The factory installed air conditioning system, I believe, weighs somewhere between 50 and 55 pounds. And so if you don't have an air conditioning system in the airplane, you can carry more fuel and or more passengers or bags. Scrolling on down below that, we see that this airplane in the additional equipment section comes with a portable air conditioner. They're basically ones that you can just sit on the back seat and it will cool down the cabin just fine when you need it. But in the wintertime, if you don't need it, you're not paying in fuel costs to carry around 50, 55 pounds of air conditioning unit. So it is a bit of a trade-off of not having an air conditioner installed, but having one available to you in the summertime when you need it. You're just not going to be able to carry as much weight. And the one thing this listing did not mention was the parachute repack date. So that might be something I'd ask the owner. So you can see there's a number of things to look at, and I alluded to it in the trade-offs that in the previous example, one owner wanted a G3, the Cirrus G3 without an air conditioning unit because it gave them the ability to carry 50 to 55 extra pounds, which translates to roughly 8 to 9 gallons. And if you're burning 20 gallons an hour, that's an additional 20, 25 minutes of flight time. So there are some trade-offs. Also mentioned, the Cirrus has the parachute. Most of the other airplanes out there on the certified market do not have an installed parachute, which is a huge safety margin. Scanning through all those listings, you may have seen something mentioned called TKS, which is flight through known icing. It has a known certified icing system or de-icing system that will allow you to fly IFR into clouds, and if icing is expected, you can turn the system on and it basically sheds the ice off your wing via what's called a weeping wing, and it injects a fluid in the leading edge that prevents icing buildup. So that's another great safety feature, but the trade-off associated with that is it tends to bleed a few extra knots off the high end because of that very porous leading edge wing. So the number of trade-offs that are out there are huge, and it just depends on how much you want to emphasize safety or capability over comfort, safety, range, speed, a number of things. So as you can see, it's a big process, and the more you research, the more you'll start to narrow it down and figure out what you want, what is acceptable, and what is unacceptable to you personally in your mission. A best piece of advice I got from a friend of mine who's now a retired airline pilot, he owns 3 airplanes. He said, when you find the plane that you want, be ready to pull the trigger right away and make an offer on it. Don't hesitate, don't delay. So that's it for now, guys. I've covered a whole bunch of stuff today and tried to keep it condensed in under about 13 minutes or so. Come back and join me for part 3, where I walk you through kind of a discussion between certified and the experimental world, which I haven't talked about just yet, and why I chose to go one way over the other. So it should be exciting. Come on back, check it out again, wait for part 3. I'll try and have that next video out in the next few days. So come on back.